Stick around because this did not go as planned. Phil here in the layer by layer layer. For this video, I'm looking at the Simpsons Treehouse of Horror 4, in which Homer famously sells his soul for a donut. And when I was looking at learning Blender, so many people pointed me to Blender Guru's donut making series, which is a really great tutorial with a link in the description, and I figured I would combine the two into a single project. There was one catch with my plan to make Homer's Forbidden Donut. The donut isn't the donut you think it is. What I picture when I think of the Simpsons donut is a donut with pink frosting and rainbow sprinkles. But this isn't the donut in the episode. The donut in the episode has pink frosting, but it has white triangular sprinkles, I assume for ease of animation. The donut also glows and sparkles like a deep-fried ring of power. So the initial plan was to make a donut with a platter beneath it that can hold lights to make it glow, and to have swappable frosting, kind of like a hat for the donut, which would make painting easier. With that in mind, and a desire to attain a forbidden donut without selling my soul, I started modeling it up in Blender. I began by adding a torus, which is the fancy math way of saying donut, and getting it to be what I thought would be a correct size. I then started to shape the donut to make it a bit lumpy, but decided that a devil donut would be near perfect, with the exception of having to sell your soul, I guess. For that price at least, it should be near perfect. To make the frosting, I duplicated the donut, moved it up, deleted half of it, and then used the solidify modifier to plump it up a bit. With the frosting in place, I then made the edges a bit wavy. With that done, I set to printing a scaled down version, and it turned out pretty terrible. The frosting did line up nicely with the donut body, but the frosting was wafer thin, and I also had yet to add any sprinkles. Though I of course realized that there were no sprinkles before printing, and definitely didn't just forget to add them. Anyway, it was back to Blender. For the sprinkles, I used geometry nodes. This involved creating a long sprinkle and then playing with weight painting and parameters to make it look quote-unquote right. I also lost this footage because I am very good at this YouTube thing. But Phil, you say, I'm watching footage right now. What do you mean you lost it? And to that, I say, how can I hear you? And also, thank you for thinking I only had to do this once to get it right. This is footage from one of the other times I had to mess with the sprinkle logic. I then wanted to trigger a test print again with the new file, but I ran into issues with exporting the STL. The sprinkles weren't exporting as part of the frosting, and when splitting in Bamboo Studio, the sprinkles ended up just on the build plate. To cut to the chase and shorten what was over an hour of troubleshooting, heartbreak, and confusion, I needed to add realize instances to the geometry node configuration for it to be exported, and also export by batch. With all that figured out, I now ran off a print at full size. I was feeling pretty confident going into this, but the result ended up being too small. I wonder how long it will take before my American brain starts thinking in metric instead of freedom. There were also sprinkles where there shouldn't be, even though I thought I had weight painted things correctly. I also felt like the sprinkles were too small, which required to go through the random seed selection process again. With all that, I finally had the long rainbow sprinkle version done, and so I needed to create the episode-specific triangle version. I thought this would be easier, and it was, at least a little bit, though I had issues creating a triangle. And after creating the triangle, I ran into something else that is becoming a bit of a theme for my projects: not being able to bevel things. I eventually just gave up and used sculpting tools to smooth over all the edges. I then swapped out the reference objects for the frosting geometry node, and I added in a randomizer to randomize the size. While I was at it, I flattened the bottom of the donut to make sure it would adhere to the build plate. With all that complete, it was back to Bamboo Studio for slicing, with a video file I rather optimistically titled Final Slicing. It was not the final slicing. However, the settings are basically the same, so I'll talk about it here. I started with the 0.08mm high quality profile. I switched to wall generation, concentric top, bottom, and solid infill with cubic sparse infill, and skinny tree support. After it printed, I was so excited that I just started spray painting without even noticing some of the issues. I primed the donut body and once again managed to get the wrong color of primer. I thought it was gray, but it turns out it was black. Because I wanted the frostings to be brighter, I skipped priming for them and just painted them pink. While those were drying, I started modeling up the platter that would hold the donut and lights beneath it. I created a large circle and tapered it down to the bottom, and then I cut a pocket for the lights and a spot for the donut to sit. I also cut out a slot for the battery pack, and a hole for the wire to go through. When I printed this up, the surface was all wavy and the quality was very low. I was able to eventually determine the issue was caused by using concentric solid infill, but it didn't really matter because when I put the donut on to test the lights, they were effectively invisible. But on top of that, there was another issue. Throughout this whole process, I completely missed the one stray triangle sprinkle on the bottom side of the frosting, which definitely caused it to not sit correctly on the donut. But it didn't really matter anyway, because even without sprinkles, it doesn't sit correctly. I swear I checked this before painting, but maybe I didn't. At this point, I was nearly broken. I was in a bind because I was way behind, and I was willing to make a deal. But unfortunately, no Devil Flanders appeared to Reno. I decided to abandon the frosting as a hat concept and just do a multicolor print, and to hollow out the donut and put the lights inside like an LED enema, an LED enema if you will. I cut a hole in the bottom of the donut by deleting the faces and solidified it, and then did a single color test print. But because there's a hole now, supports were needed, and when the print was done, I couldn't actually get the supports out. So I went ahead and made the hole bigger, but then it turns out the donut was too thick and the lights didn't show through very well. So I made the donut thinner and printed again, and I finally had a glowing donut. For the platter, I made a few changes by making it flat across the top and making the cutout in the top a rectangle so that the wires could stay inside the donuts and the battery pack could be fed through where it was attached with Velcro. The final thing to do was to get the color changes as low as possible. For this, I used the layer painting function in Bamboo Studio and painted as much of the top pink as possible, keeping filament changes very low for the multicolor print, about 17. With the actual final slice and final print done, it was now time to finally paint sprinkles and finally install lights. Finally. For the triangles, it was just white. For the long sprinkles, I painted them with white primer before painting them red, green, blue, yellow, and white. As for the lights, I came up with two different possibilities to install them, both of which were annoying because the lights I bought got tangled and formed knots with themselves while installing. For the first method, I wrapped the lights around the center pillar to make a glowing donut. For the second, I did more of a rat's nest to get lights close to the surface and make a sparkling look. Since I had the two donuts, I just went ahead and did both, and now it's time to serve them up in the glam shots. And now over to my very own Marge, Lisa, and Maggie to see what they think. Which sprinkles do you prefer?
The rainbow sprinkles, of course.
Rainbow sprinkles. White triangles.
Which winding of lights do you prefer? The one that's a little bit closer to the surface, or the one with an inner glow?
The inner glow.
The glowing. The like spotty thingy. Yeah.
Which donut and lighting install do you prefer? Let me know in the comments. If you want to summon your own forbidden donut, everything is on MakerWorld. There are two versions, hollow and solid, and each of those have rainbow and triangle versions of their very own. There's also a platter with the battery space and also a simple flat platter. The sprinkles and frosting are separate parts, so you can color them easily, and for all of this, there's no need to sell any souls. There are also links to the lights I used on Amazon in the description, so be sure to check it out, and while you're at it, go ahead and subscribe, and maybe check out this video here for another cool project.